Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess game. Today we're going to talk about chess improvement in general. We're going to talk a little bit about improving your analytical skills. I did a video that won an award a couple years ago called The Ways to Make Better Chess Moves. And what I said was very, very important. I guess that's why I won the award, which is there's basically only two main ways you get to be better. You can memorize better things. You can memorize more new openings. You can learn a new endgame. You could study tactics and learn a new tactical pattern. You could read a principle and learn a principle. Those are all knowledge things, and they're all very helpful and very necessary. But the other way of doing it is when you're in a position where you don't know what to do and there's nothing familiar, you have to be able to find a better chess move by using your skills, your analytical skills, your evaluation skill, your time management. Time management is a very important part of chess. A lot of people are very good about improving their knowledge, but they're not so good about improving their skills. They don't do better time management. A lot of the people who come to me for lessons for the first time have very poor time management. They don't know how to improve their analytical skills. They don't even know much what an evaluation is. They have an idea, of course. So they don't know really how to improve. And I tell them through the homework, we can work on your knowledge skills, but we also want through the homework and through the lessons to improve your skills that make you better, not just your knowledge, but your analysis, your evaluation, your time management. Time management is usually, unless people are slow and they have a psychological hang-up about making a move, they're so afraid of making mistakes. Sometimes time management we can start to work on right away. But analytical skills, evaluation skills, they take a little bit of time. I thought we'd practice a little bit on the analytical side of things by doing a puzzle that I hadn't seen in many years. I kind of randomly opened up the book, Chess Training Pocketbook by Lev Albert, and I went to problem number 204, and that was this problem. And I didn't remember the problem at all. So I thought that I would solve it and talk about, how my analytical skills are involved here. So let's take a look at the puzzle. What's the first thing you do when you look at a puzzle? Well, you count the material and you see what in the heck's going on. So here, black has an extra bishop, white has an extra pawn. So white is down a bishop for a pawn. He sacrificed a piece to open up the black pieces. And it's white's turn. And we kind of get the feeling if it's white to play, it's probably going to be white to play and win. But, in puzzle books like this, sometimes if you're down a piece, maybe it's white to play and force a draw or something like that. We don't know. We just know that white has something good that he can do here. And we have to figure out what it is. So how do you start? Well, when you're doing an analytical puzzle like this, the first thing I would say to do is start with the safe checks and see what's going on. All right, so how many safe checks does white have? If you look at the board and you came up with a number that's not something like 4, there's a problem. Queen to, well, maybe 5. Queen to f3 is a check that's safe. Queen to f4 is a check that's safe. Rook to f3 is a check that's safe. Queen to g7 is a check that's safe. And queen to g8 is a check that's safe. So that's 5. Does that mean that a check like knight d6 check to deflect a black piece might not be the right idea? Or knight g5 check to maybe get him to force him to take somewhere might be the right idea? Yes, and one of the problems with doing a lot of these kind of tactical puzzles is very often the kind of moves that work in a game, which are the mundane moves, are not part of the puzzle. The puzzle has spectacular moves so they can sell the book. So puzzles aren't always indicative of what you can do in a game, but they do try to build up your analytical capability and your knowledge of what might be going on in these patterns. All right, so we have all those checks to look at. Let's start by moving the queen close to the king and see what the problem is. Let's say we play, queen to g8 check. Then black only has one legal move, and that's king to e8. And when someone does something like that, you can still keep going and still look at more checks, and you should. But you also have to ask yourself, what good was chasing the king to e8? In some cases, chasing the king is not a great idea because he's running toward his defensive area where he can come out maybe to d7 and back to c8 and escape to the queen side. One of the things that you see in books very often is don't check the king, block his squares where he can run away first. So if we're looking for moves that would block his king going to e8, that would be knight to d6 check or knight to f6. So those become candidate moves too. Like maybe if you play one of those moves first and you force him to take, it does something, opens him up in a way that would be bad. So there's lots and lots of things going on here, and we have to work through them. Okay, another interesting point is one of the unsafe checks, queen to h5 check, would be mate, or at least would be win at least the knight and maybe mate right after that, if black didn't have the reply queen takes h5. So if we can block the 5th rank somehow, if we can make that queen get off the 5th rank, let's say white does nothing and black plays queen takes a2, then queen h5 check, black's only legal move is knight g6, and then after queen takes g6 check, king to f8, and then queen g8 is mate. So if we can get the queen off the 5th rank, then we could win. Well, that means we have a candidate move, something like c4. c4 looks unsafe. Nothing's guarding the pawn on c4, nothing's guarding the pawn on d4. But the problem for black is if you play c4 to remove the guard, if he moves the queen anywhere off the 5th rank, let's say queen takes d4, then queen h5 check is going to immediately win the knight and probably mate him. So c4, queen takes d4, queen h5 check, knight g6 is the only legal move, queen takes g6 check, king to f8, queen g8 checkmate. So c4 becomes a big candidate move. But then we have to ask ourselves, what would he do if you play c4? Well, he's not going to take the pawn and let you checkmate him with queen h5. He's going to continue to guard the h5 square. So he's going to play queen to a5. And now you have to ask yourself, how did that help you? If you play c4 and you force him to play queen to a5, what can you do? Well, maybe now you could block the 5th rank with a pawn or a knight. Maybe you could play d5, hitting the e6 pawn, and if he just takes it with a pawn, maybe you have queen h5 check anyway. Now, it's a little more complicated because if he takes with the e-pawn, he now has the e6 square for his king. But it becomes an analytical possibility that we could play c4, queen a5, and then something like d5. Another problem with doing that is he can just move his king at that point because you're not really making any giant threats. After c4, queen a5, d5, he could play king e8 and start to run his king. And then if you play queen h5 check, he can play king d7. If instead white plays d takes e6 to guard the squares where the king can come out, then black could probably move the rook on d8 and give the king the d8 square. So for instance, I'm looking at the line c4, queen a5, d5, king e8, d takes e6, and then maybe, I don't know, rook to d4 or something. By the way, if you have trouble visualizing those things, visualization is a skill you need to work on for your analytical capability. So you want to keep track of where the pieces are when you're moving them. If you're not sure, you can go back to the last point you were sure. You can go back to the start and try again. You want to work on those analytical skills. This also brings up a point that I talk to all my students about, and I've talked about in many of these videos, which is to do the kind of things we're doing now, and to do them well, you have to practice them. A lot of people these days go on chess.com or somewhere, or Elite Chess, and they play like 10-minute games, and they think those are the slow games. They think the 3-minute games are the fast games, and the 10 and 15-minute games are the slow games. But in order to practice these visualization skills, in order to practice your analytical skills, in order to really get good at chess, you have to learn how to think better. You have to learn how to analyze better, evaluate better. You have to learn how to use those sub-skills like visualization. And to do that, you need to practice them. And for practicing them, you need time. And if you're always playing 10-minute games, you're never doing the kind of stuff we're doing in this video. So you could watch all the videos you want, but if you're going to go out and play all 10-minute games, if there's 40 moves in a 10-minute game, and that's 600 seconds divided by 40, that's 15 seconds a move, you're just going to kind of make moves and see what's going to happen. And that's not a way to get better at chess. You're not going to be really improving a lot of your skills. So it really takes a lot of consistent slow chess to improve your skills. How did all the best players in the world get to be that way? They didn't get to be that way by playing their whole life playing 10-minute games, they wouldn't even get the Grandmaster title, because Grandmaster titles are given out by slow games. It's because starting when they were kids, they started playing in 1 million tournaments and 1 million slow games. Did they play a lot of fast games for fun too? Of course they did. Nothing wrong with playing a lot of fast games. I've had people quote me saying, Dan says you shouldn't play fast games. I've never said that in my life. Fast games are good for you. It's just only fast games. That's a whole different ball game. So playing a lot of fast games is helpful. You can practice your openings, you can practice your tactics, your time management, but you also need to play a lot of slow games. When I say slow, I don't mean 30-0, where you hit a button and play some random person who's going to play fast against you and resign in 3 moves. I mean, really find some people that'll play you at 90-30 or 60-30 or 45-45. There's 45-45 leagues, a bunch of them online where you can play. You can go to your local club and play. You can play in USCF tournaments or tournaments in your country where people are playing slow chess. All right, let's get back to solve this problem. So we saw we could play c4, but how does that help after queen to a5? And now white could take another time and block the h5 square with a move like c5. But as we just saw, black has an extra tempo now to defend against that and can play maybe king to e8, maybe followed by moving the rook on d8. And white's not getting very far. For instance, c4, queen a5, c5. I hope you can visualize that. Everything in the board is exactly where it is now, except the white pawn that was on c3 has moved up to c5 in 2 moves. And the black queen is now on a5, and white's threatening queen h5 check. But the problem is black can play king e8, let's say, and if white plays queen h5 check, then black can play king to d7, and black's starting to run away. We're not getting anywhere. All right, suppose we guard that e8 square with a knight move first. Suppose we play knight f6. Knight f6 hits the queen and guards the e8 square. The problem is he could just take it with the king or the bishop. Let's say he takes it with the bishop. If he takes it with the bishop, he's then guarding g7. We could still play queen g8 check. But then when he plays king e7 or king e8, we didn't really make any progress. So knight f6 was an interesting idea. It didn't work. How about knight d6 check? If he takes with the queen, maybe queen h5 check can still win, although now he has king f6. Why does he have king f6? Because when we sack the knight with knight d6 check, the knight's not guarding the f6 square anymore. Again, these are visualization ideas, analytical ideas. But on knight d6 check, queen takes d6 is not forced. Why not leave the queen on d5 to keep guarding the h5 square? He could take with the rook and the bishop. And that's very discouraging, because if he just takes with the rook, not much has changed except we lost the knight too, and we still can't play queen h5 check. Let's look at rook f3 check. Rook f3 check. He can't put the bishop in the way. We can just take it. So he has to play king e8. Then we could play rook takes f8 check. All right, that's worth looking at. If he takes with the bishop, voila! Knight f6 check wins the queen for the knight, and we were down a piece, then we give up the exchange, so we were down a rook, and now we win a queen for a knight, so that means white's probably winning if he takes with the bishop. There's only one problem. That's not forced. After rook f3 check, king e8, rook takes f8 check, he doesn't have to take with the bishop and remove the guard on the f6 square. He can take with the king and say, no, it doesn't work. And now we've lost the rook as an attacker. The knight can't get to f8. The queen still has a check or two, maybe on f4 or f3, but without the rook, he's not making any progress because he's not guarding the g-file anymore. So it looks like rook f3 check, king to e8, rook takes f8 check, king takes f8 is good for black. If he plays bishop takes f8, well, that's a big blunder, but you don't play lines that are bad hoping your opponent will play worse. So if you play rook f3 check, king e8 with the idea that rook f8 check would win if he takes with the bishop, that's not good analysis, because you have to assume he's going to play the right moves, and then when he gets that far, he's going to look at it and say, oh, I can take with the bishop, I can take with the king. Oh, if I take with the bishop, he's got knight f6 check. If you can't visualize that, let's show it. Rook f3 check, king e8, rook takes f8 check. Can't take with the bishop because the knight fork here on f6, but unfortunately it just takes with the king. All right, let's go back. So we still haven't solved it yet. All right, well, we still have to look at some of these queen checks. We looked at queen g8 check. How about queen g7 check? That looks like almost the same thing. Queen g7 check, king e8. What's the only difference? Well, we could play queen takes e7 check and give up the queen. Could we possibly mate with the rook and the knight? Such a thing has happened before in puzzles. It doesn't happen in games very much, but it does in puzzles. So let's look at that. Queen g7 check, king e8, queen takes e7 check. Well, his only legal move is king takes e7, and now we play rook g7 check. Well, that is interesting. He can't play king d6 because of the knight. He can't play king f6 because of the knight. He can't put anything in the way. He has to play king to e8, and then we have knight f6, forking the king and the queen, but we already gave up the queen. That's the bad news. The good news is that knight f6 is checkmate. We don't have to win the queen. Aha! So now we've got something. All right, so it looks like, unfortunately, this is one of those silly queen sack lines that occur very often in puzzles, but in games happen in 1 in 1,000 games where you get a chance to do something like this. And that's one of the problems with, I think, with problem sets where you have a lot of queen sacrifices, is you end up spending a lot of time in games looking for crazy queen sacrifices that work in puzzles, but in games, they do work once in a blue moon, maybe a couple times in your lifetime, but all the other times you're spending time looking for stuff that's not the normal stuff that you wouldn't have. So let's go over this supposed solution that we have here again. Queen to g7 check. His only legal move is king to e8. We're then going to play queen takes e7 check. His only legal move is king takes e7. Then we play rook g7 check. Everything's perfect here. The pawn on e6 is blocking the king from coming up to e6. The knight on f8 is blocking the king from going back to f8. The rook on d8 is blocking the king from going back to d8. The knight on e4 is stopping the king from coming up to d6 and f6. His only legal move, therefore, is king to king to e8. And then we need a safe check with the knight, which we do. Knight f6 check, and we've got the checkmate. Can you visualize that? Queen g7 check. Again, if you're not good at visualization, you want to practice this. Practice does not make perfect. Practice makes better. If you practice visualizing, I know people after the video, they go in the comment field and they say, Dan, why don't you move the pieces? I can't visualize it. You need to show me what it is. And I go, well, okay, I could do that all the time and use it as a crutch, but you want to practice visualizing. So let's do it together. We'll visualize it, and then I will, yes, move the pieces and end the video. All right, so queen g7 check. The queen has gone from g4 to g7. All the other pieces are right where they are. The only legal move black has is king to e8. Now the only two pieces that have moved are the queen has gone from g4 to g7. The king has gone from f7 to e8. All the other pieces are right there. So you picture a queen, you imagine a queen on g7, you imagine a king on e8, and now we're going to imagine that queen on g7 goes over to e7 and takes that bishop. Queen takes e7 check. Now he's right in front of that king on e8, so the only way black can get out of check is play king takes e8. If you're visualizing that, it looks just like the starting position, except the king that was on f7 is now on e7, replacing the bishop. The bishop is gone, and the queen on g4 is gone. Everything else is the same. So the king is just sitting on e7, the black king sitting on e7. There's no black bishop, and there's no white queen on g4. The queen has taken off that bishop, and the king has ended up on e7. Now we're going to take that rook on g3 and move him up to g7 and check the king. Again, everything looks kind of the same as it did at the start, except now there's a king on e7, there's a rook on g7, there's no black bishop, there's no white queen. The black king on e7 has to move out of check. His only legal move is to play king e8. Now we have a rook on g7. His king is on e8, and we need to make a move. We can play knight f6 check. Can he take with the king? No, the king has moved to e8. It can't take on f6. Can he take with the bishop? No, that's long gone. We took it on the second move with the queen. So knight f6 check is now an empty square. Let's show what I just said so you don't have to visualize it. Queen g7 check, move 1. King e8, black's move 1. Queen e7, white's move 2. King takes e7, black's move 2. Rook g7 check, white's move 3. King e8, black's move 3. Knight f6 check. Happens to fork the king and the queen, but we really don't care. What we do want is the fact that it's mate, and we get a mate. So that's what you should visualize. And that's the answer to the problem, and I couldn't remember that. It took me a few minutes to figure it out, and I sort of simulated what I did when I did the video, but that's what you want to do. So You're working on your visualization skills. You're working on your analytical skills. We don't have too much evaluation skills because checkmate is checkmate. We don't care that white's a little better or black's a little better. At the start, we really did care. At the start, white was down a bishop for a pawn, so our evaluation was that materially white was in trouble and white needed to find something, which of course if it's a puzzle we pretty much know there's something there. Okay, so you want to work on these skills. You don't want to just increase your knowledge. When we did this pattern, we increased our knowledge a little bit, but what we're really trying to do is work on our skills. The three big skills, there's lots and lots of skills in chess, like even stamina is a skill, and concentration is a skill, and consistency is a really important skill. The big three skills are analysis, evaluation, and time management. You want to work on things that improve your skills. You want to play lots of slow games. You want to play lots of fast games too. That's great. You want to play lots of slow games and work on your skills. And after the game, go over the game with your opponents. That's one big advantage of going to clubs and tournaments instead of playing online. Online, it's hard to get people to go over the games with you unless you arrange games, which you certainly should. If you're not familiar with my website, I have a page which we can pull up, which I suggest everybody read. We go to danheisman.com. We go to articles and blogs. We go over here to find slow chess on chess.com. I highly recommend everybody read this article. The URL here is danheisman.com/find-slows-chess-on-chess.com-.html. But don't worry about that. Just go to danheisman.com, click on articles and blogs, go to the first pull-down menu, articles and blogs, find slow chess on chess.com. I know it's right off the edge of what you're seeing there. But there it is, a little page on finding slow chess on chess.com. Okay, so hopefully you'll tell people about my channel, Dan Heisman Chess, here on people say to me, how come more people don't watch your videos? Millions of people watch this other guy's videos and you're way better than him, or you're just as good and nobody watches your videos. Okay, well, people who say that, you have chess friends, you have clubs, you have tournaments, you have email lists, you have Twitter friends, you have Facebook friends. You can say, hey, www.youtube.com/c/Dan Heisman Chess. Go check it out. That's the channel. That's what you can do. You can help me. You can pass the word. If everybody passes the word and says, hey, if you have chess friends, pass the word too. This is a really good channel. It's won lots of awards for best videos. If you do that, then people will come and they'll see for themselves. All right, thanks very much. You can also like the video. You can subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye.